Well, the criticisms fall into two categories. One are the criticisms which sprang up immediately after the proclamation was issued. Those were criticisms which told him he had gone entirely too far, that he had exceeded all proper definitions of the constitutional role of the President of the United States, that he was a dictator, he was a tyrant, he was attempting to foment slave insurrections in the Confederacy. He was taking the Constitution and tearing it to bits. And these criticisms did not come simply from penny-ante journalists. They came from the new governor of New York State, Horatio Seymour, who denounced the Emancipation Proclamation as a usurpation of presidential authority. It came from the new governor of New Jersey, Joel Parker, who said pretty much the same thing. It came from across the North. It even came from Lincoln's own home state of Illinois. The new legislature that convened in Springfield, Illinois in January of 1863 was vivid with denunciations of Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation, and culminated in a proposed resolution before the legislature that the United States government be told by the state of Illinois that a peace convention needed to be called to meet in Louisville, Kentucky on the 4th of July, 1863. Of course, by the 4th of July, 1863, some other events had happened, most importantly, Gettysburg. But that was the kind of criticism that Lincoln endured. It was a criticism that said, you have done too much. You've exceeded your boundaries. You have no authority. As president or commander-in-chief, you have no war powers, whatever on earth those war powers are supposed to be, to do this kind of thing and issue this kind of proclamation. And those kinds of criticisms persisted for many years. In fact, as late as the 1880s, articles in the North American Review, and I'm thinking particularly here of one article by Richard Henry Dana, reviewed the legal status of the Emancipation Proclamation and suggested that, in fact, the Emancipation Proclamation had no enforceable legal standing. That was a somewhat eccentric opinion, but it gives you an idea how, even for years afterwards, Lincoln was criticized for issuing the proclamation for going too far. In more recent times, and really this is largely since the 1940s and 1950s, Lincoln has been criticized, and the Emancipation Proclamation has been criticized, for not doing enough rather than going too far. For instance, Richard Hofstadter, in a famous essay on Lincoln as a self-made man, described the Emancipation Proclamation as having all the moral authority of a bill of lading. And this is because the Emancipation Proclamation, said Hofstadter, is written in such dull, legal language. Lots of therefores and whereases. And Hofstadter reasoned, this is the man who's the author of the Gettysburg Address, the Second Inaugural. If he really wanted to work himself up into eloquence, he could have done it. But the fact that he doesn't means that, well, his heart really couldn't have been in it. So, the bill of lading, that becomes a millstone hung around the proclamation's neck. And it's followed by criticisms for people who take issue not just with the apparent dullness of its language, but who criticize Lincoln for waiting until 1863 to move to emancipation. Why didn't Lincoln issue an Emancipation Proclamation freeing the slaves right after the beginning of the war at Fort Sumter? Or why didn't Lincoln free all of the slaves at one stroke? Why did he leave the slaves of the border states in bondage? Why did he not free the slaves that are to be found in the districts of the South occupied by the Union Army? I think those are questions that are easy to ask when you're only looking at the proclamation from a very, very, very long distance.